very much indeed, Chair, and it's a pleasure to participate. I want to acknowledge the very powerful speeches made by all members this afternoon, and to acknowledge my very deep respect for the Right Honourable Lady. Nobody speaks with greater sincerity and authority on behalf of people who are marginalised and disadvantaged in our society, and I pay tribute to her and her work and her contribution today. I want to say a quick word about the history, as mention has been made, of the Conservative time in office. And I want to acknowledge that genuine mistakes, I think, were made in the design of the welfare system that we have now. The system is clearly not perfect, but it very much was not perfect before. In 2010, the system was extremely complex, very high rates of benefit dependency. The introduction of universal credit and PIP helped to rationalise and bring greater order to the system and reward work rather than welfare, and significant improvements were made in that regard, including improvements in the numbers of disabled people who were able to work and supported in work. Just in the last year of our time in government, 300,000 more disabled people were in work than the year before. So there was genuine improvement. Nevertheless, there was not enough support given to many welfare recipients. And that is the consequence of the fiscal inheritance that we had after 2010, but also of choices made by the coalition government that fell particularly hard on local authorities and on the DWP. So I want to acknowledge that point that's often made by honourable members. And then something else happened around 2017, 2018, and then even more so after COVID. We saw a significant rise in the number of people who were in receipt of health and disability benefits, including in the higher categories of UC health, and people being stuck on benefits, in many cases, indefinitely and forever. And we've seen, and this is what I think explains the imperative of reform that the government is responding to, which is that we see numbers of people on the high rates of UC increased by a third over the previous 5 years. The PIP budget is growing by 50% in this Parliament alone. So the fact is the benefit bill is unsustainable. But it is also true that the system can be inhumane and ungenerous. So we have a paradox that we have a system that is bloated overall, unsustainably large budgets we are facing, and yet on the front line, in terms of people's actual experience, the system is starved. They are starving, but in terms of the consequence of the inadequacy of benefits for many people. So this is a huge opportunity and an imperative for reform, genuine reform, not just the soundbite. I notice we don't have any reform MPs, unless... No. Reform MPs attending today. We genuinely need real reform. In 2024, the government that I supported had plans to bring in further reforms to the benefit system. We did not have the opportunity to introduce those reforms, thanks to the public. The honourable members here were elected with a huge majority. And it is my regret and surprise, Madam Chair, that after 14 years of complaints about government welfare reforms, the Labour Party entered government apparently without any plans to change the system. And we spent 8 months waiting for reforms to be introduced, only to get what we have now, which is a crude and cruel set of cuts, not reforming the system at all, purely in response to what the Chancellor has done to the British economy, which has induced a fiscal crisis and caused the Treasury to demand of the DWP that swingeing cuts are made to the welfare budget, but without any opportunity to reform the system or to reduce demand for welfare, which is, of course, what we should be doing if we want to bring down the bills. They're also, of course, increasing taxes. I won't discuss that, including on employers, which makes it much harder for people to move from welfare into work. And they're removing a vital support from pensioners with the winter fuel payment cut. Happy to give way.
Thanks very much for giving way. Would the honourable gentleman care to say to the floor of the House here this afternoon how much the Her Majesty's opposition are proposing to cut from the welfare bill?
I'm very grateful. Well, the honourable gentleman won't be surprised to know that, and will be gratified to know, we're not in government. It's not for us to come forward with precise plans. We had a manifesto commitment to reduce benefit spending and to reform both disability benefits and UC at the end of the last Parliament. We're now in a position of policy formulation. So I'm afraid I'm not able to tell him exactly what we would do at the present time. The purpose of my role here is to challenge the government on why they've taken so long to come forward with the absence of meaningful reform plans. I do want to see benefit spending reduce, perhaps in contradiction to the honourable gentleman. I think we spend too much on welfare in this country, but that is because we have social breakdown, we have poverty, and the answer to that is not simply to cut benefits without reforming the system, but to reduce the drivers of poverty that we have. So I recognise many of the problems with PIP, and I understand the imperative for change. And honourable members have made the case very powerfully about how inadequate the system is currently, particularly for people with fluctuating conditions. And we've heard very powerful testimony from that, including on the Work and Pensions Select Committee, which many honourable members and the chairman is here. We've been taking evidence on that. In fact, just this morning we heard powerful evidence from people talking about the mental health and how, while people who have a set of very complex interconnected needs might not reach the 4 points on any one measure, and nevertheless could lose PIP under this proposal. Also, I've read evidence from the MS Society, which makes the same point. 48% of PIP recipients with MS don't reach 4 points in any one of the measures, so they would be at risk as well. So I'm very concerned on behalf of those individuals. And I'm very concerned that we don't even know how many there are, and members have made the point. I took a Freedom of Information request to get this figure of 1.3 million out of the government. That wasn't the figure that was officially released. As the Liberal Democrat spokesman just said, we're also unclear about the effect on passported benefits, which I think is a very significant question for the government to answer. And most of all, we don't know what the assessment review, which the government has announced, will come forward with, and yet we are making the cut before we understand how the method of assessing eligibility will be reformed. So I implore the Minister, we need a pause in this, in the measures introduced in the Green Paper. We need a proper review, not just of the assessment, but of the way the whole system works. Absolutely, we need to bring down the benefits bill, but as I've said, we do that by reducing demand for welfare, and many of the levers there, of course, are outside the DWP. Nevertheless, we should redesign the system itself because of the many problems with it that I've identified, and we should do that, as members have said, with claimants, not to them. So, lastly, Chair, let me just emphasise, people voted for change in 2024. They're not getting it. The Prime Minister promises more of the same, to go further and faster with the course that he's already on. I deeply regret what he's doing. I have very great respect for the Minister, and few people have spoken with greater authority and conviction and expertise on the subject of welfare in our Parliament in recent times. I have great sympathy for him having to defend this policy position, which I don't think he would have defended in opposition. And I want to echo the points made by the members for York Central, for Hayes and Hollington, and of course for Hackney North, when they say Labour should be better than this. I agree, we should all be better than this. And my party will stand with members opposing these measures. Thank you.